Welcome to the Guns and Gavel Show, where Arizona's self-defense and firearms attorney, Tim Forshey, weighs in on the delicate balance between the law and personal protection. Learn about the legalities and realities of self-defense as he dives deep to discuss firearms laws, legal use of force, concealed carry, and home defense training. The Guns and Gavel Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Hi folks, Tim Forshey here again, and I've got a real treat for you today. One of my close friends who's an absolute subject expert in all things related to self-defense, John Correia, has agreed to join me today. I had some photographs of him in a safety deposit box, and I had to threaten, but I actually got him to take time out of his busy schedule and come down and talk to us today. So I want to share this. John, as you guys all know, is the host.
See those photographs.
You're not going to see him yet, pal. I got to squeeze you a little bit more. As all of you know, John is the host of one of the most popular YouTube channels out there, Active Self-Protection. He's been doing that for years and years, and it's rare that I bump into somebody in one of my CCW classes that's not a hard-charging fan of John's, and it's just such a treat for him to be here. So, John, I know it's corny as heck, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Everybody knows you from the channel, and they know what you do, but a lot of them don't know. I've gotten to know you over the last years. I've had several meals with you. I consider you close friends. Sure. And there's a lot about you that I just find so interesting and so unique that people wouldn't guess about you. So I know this is kind of weird to put you on the spot, but give us your bio.
Okay, so
you're meeting your fiance's dad for the first time. Tell us about yourself.
My wife is going to be so mad I'm meeting my fiance's dad. So yeah, I run Active Self-Protection, which is a self-defense and firearms training company based out of Phoenix, Arizona. If you've ever seen this face or heard this voice, it's because people send me real-life surveillance videos of defensive encounters that people have gotten into, and I do after-action reports on them. So armed robberies, carjackings, muggings, stabbings, home invasions, badge cams as well. We put out 10 of those every week on the big channel. We have a second channel, Active Self-Protection Extra, which Tim is on with us on the regular.
Lucky enough to be on there before, yeah.
And we do firearms training, handguns, shotguns, carbines. We do some gear reviews. We talk legal and moral self-defense every Friday. And do class reviews, those kinds of things on that channel. So before that, I've been doing this now solo. So ASP has been my only job since 2018. But I've run the company since 2011. In the midst there, it was a side hustle. So this whole thing started for me as a side hustle. Before that, I spent 14 years in the Phoenix area in vocational pastoral ministry. My formal education, I have a master's of divinity, which I got in 2006. Before that, my first real big, I was in retail management for a while I was in seminary. And then my first big boy job, I was a member of Uncle Sam's Canoe Club. I made hot water the hard way in the United States Navy. You can make an awful lot of it. The hard way to make hot water is to split atoms. And sounds really impressive. I was a nuclear reactor operator.
Also the easy way, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
once you get it set up, it works pretty well.
It's really not that hard. People think it's hard. You go, listen, wow, that sounds really impressive. Nah, I just watched a rock get hot. Hot rock makes hot water makes steam.
Yeah, for those of you guys out there that don't know it, the nuclear arm of the Navy is the elite. That's not the dopes, that's for sure. So yeah.
You got to have some brains. You don't have to have any common sense, but you do have to have some brains.
One thing I've always wondered, and I've had a lot of people ask me this, is how in the heck do you get access to all these videos? Are people sending them to you voluntarily? How do you vet them to make sure they're legit, they're not photoshopped, or they're not deep faked?
Well,
how do you do that?
So most of them are actually available on social media. The vast majority that we do are sent to us by fans. I have one of my employees who does nothing but clear inboxes for me. So we have a email address that people can send things to. Our Facebook page is inundated with people sending us links. I also get people send them to me, and they're generally available on social media. So then we go through and we validate via news stories and those things, which is why on the big channel you'll always see in the description, here are news stories related to the event. Here's where I got the raw video from this, and those things. Every once in a while you can't, but at this point, quite frankly, I can kind of sniff out what's right and what's wrong. And so you can kind of be like, wait a minute, put that calibrated thumb out there. Nope, that don't look right.
Wait, I don't think Kim Kardashian robbed a liquor store.
Yeah, exactly.
That? That doesn't make sense.
Probably not okay. So, and that's the vast majority of them, though we do now, we've started to see kind of more and more of people involved in those incidents that will send me an email and say, hey, John, I have this thing. It's nowhere in the universe. It's never been posted on social media. I'd love your thoughts on how I did because I'm a fan.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get to watch it. Now, honestly, a bunch of those, I've had people send them to me, and I say, friend, I would delete this from every hard drive you've ever had. I would forget that you ever did it. I would ignore this, and please don't ever tell anyone but your attorney that this went down. And I've said that more times than
It's amazing how blissfully ignorant some of these people are about these things that can wind them up in jail. I've had people come in, and granted, you have attorney-client privilege when you speak to me, but some of the things that people blurt out, they have absolutely no idea that what they're admitting to is a serious crime.
Right.
And they just, which is one of the reasons that we're trying to do what we do, I think, is to help people with that. But
decrease those numbers.
Wow, yeah.
And then others are really excellent defensive,
yes.
Use of force, and to say, hey, wow, that's a great story. Yep. We'd love to. We have a podcast, so my friend Mike hosts our podcast, and so we ask those folks, if you've been in a real defensive encounter, especially if we've got it on the main channel, come and talk about your experience, because what we see on video is a subjective kind of analysis of it from a third perspective, but how you experienced it through your own eyes and in your own emotions is different. So, so we do that. We have, like I say, we have a podcast. We teach classes all over the country. I do a fair bit, depends on who you ask, how much is a fair bit of expert witness work as well, because I'm kind of the guy now that if you go, hey, how do real defensive gunfights go? They call me. So
well, you've got a database probably like nobody else, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's nothing else like that that exists.
So I'm sure, and I apologize, I haven't looked at the channel in a couple of weeks. Have you already covered this, the Taqueria shooting in Houston?
Yeah, we did.
Covered that. Do you mind covering it again for 40 seconds?
No, I don't mind at all.
Because I'm getting asked about it just nonstop. We're recording this, folks, in mid-February 2023, and the hot story right now in the self-defense market is this self-defense shooting, or was it, in a taco shop in Houston, Texas, sometime in the last few weeks. And I've not talked to John about this until right now, so I'm ambushing him, and his response will surprise me probably. Maybe it won't. I bet it won't.
A little bit of payback for me doing this to you.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even know I was going to do it until just now. But I'm going to summarize this, and you correct me when I'm wrong, but you've analyzed it frame by frame probably. I would characterize it this way. A young man comes into a taco shop. I didn't count, but I'm going to guesstimate somewhere around 10 to 12 patrons in the shop. Is that in the ballpark?
Yeah.
And holding a gun, as I recall, gangster style horizontally, which tells you something about the guy at that point as well, is holding everybody at gunpoint, robs the taqueria, and then starts robbing the individual customers of their watches and their wallets and their cash. And then he basically, after he's completed that task, he turns and he's exiting the diner, and then one of the patrons slides out of the bench and draws a concealed weapon and fires, I believe, 6 shots into the guy's back. So let's stop it there. Is that accurate?
9.
Well, he fired 9, but there was a volley of 6 at first. Then he approached the guy and fired 3 more, didn't he?
4 and 1.
4, 4, and 1. I thought it was 6, 3, and 1. Okay, good enough. So
yeah,
4, 4, and 1.
4 and 1.
So let's first talk about the first 4 shots. The guy's fleeing, and I've had so many people say, wait a minute, the guy's leaving. How can you possibly justify to shoot somebody in the back? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, so I don't think he's necessarily leaving at that point. Okay, at that point, he's still pointing a gun at people.
I couldn't agree more.
He's still threatening them. The guy doesn't really slide out. He just draws his gun and goes to work on the guy. And I don't have any problem at all with the first 4 shots.
Me too.
That dude put the quarter in the jukebox, so he gets to dance to the song.
And I've had several students say, but the guy was leaving. And I'm like, well, clearly he's a man of upstanding character, and we can clearly trust him. I mean, he's obviously concluded his transaction. He's abided by the terms of the contract, so we can clearly trust him to leave without hurting anybody. I mean, that's nonsense, but people don't understand that that's nonsense.
Well, and I mean, my first bailiwick, I would rather us all be good moral people rather than just strictly legal.
Exactly, man.
You can do all kinds of stuff that's legal that ain't moral.
There's smart, there's moral, there's legal, maybe in that order, right?
Maybe in that order, right? Our politicians lead us in immoral but legal behavior. So, did I say that outside? Anyways, but then, is this guy, we ask the question from a moral perspective, is he right now in this moment a deadly threat to the people around him? Does he have the ability, the opportunity, and the manifested intent to do people harm that would likely put him in the hospital or kill him? In that moment, I believe the answer is yes.
I agree. And he could have easily pivoted and started wiping out witnesses in a heartbeat.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, every state in the union has a law about the defense of third parties that, some people are like, well, you can only shoot him if he's pointing the gun at you. That's not true.
At all.
If he's pointing the gun at somebody else, I can defend them as they could defend themselves in that situation. And so those first 4 shots, that first volley, no problem in the universe.
I couldn't agree more. Now, I think we're probably in accord on the second volley as well, but tell me about the next volley of 4.
Yeah,
which the guy's down now, as I recall, correct?
Yeah, he starts going down at least. So that first volley, gets the gun out, bang, 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 bang. Then he kind of steps out and up and sees him again, and the guy is either going down or on the ground, and bang, 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 puts 4 more in him. They're fairly quick and fairly close afterwards. In those ones, I would definitely say the tie goes to the runner. Like I'm
the same way. I've told people to say it's just nice to know that you and I are on the same page on this, because I'm like, look, I don't know that I would have fired that next volley, but I think with the right jury and the right attorney that knows how to teach the jury properly, I think that you could probably justify those 4, because as you said, if you have a reasonable doubt, you're supposed to side in favor of the defendant.
Right.
And I would have had a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
Could he see something I couldn't see? What was he feeling, et cetera? So I would have given him the doubt there.
Or again, he's a not a highly trained person,
Right.
and he's been taught probably to focus on his front sight.
Right.
And so the fact of the matter is he's seeing the suspect in a blurriness. And again, so he's not a highly trained guy. He's not running a red dot. He's not, got hundreds of hours of firearms instruction. And so he's just looking at his front sight, steps up, still sees his front sight, and maybe he doesn't see yet that the gun is skittered out of the guy's hands.
That's what I was going to ask. So right after, or near the end of that second volley of shots, you can clearly see the gun that was in, I believe, the gentleman's left hand skitter across the ground there, the tile of the floor.
Right.
Then, as I recall, he takes a few steps to the left, picks the gun up, then walks over and delivers a coup de grace that I don't see how anybody could say is justified.
So there's an interesting bit here that the raw video that came out, we really had to search for the original. The original, of course, got chopped up by news stations and those things.
Sure.
But finally found the raw video that had been put out. And but of course, in the raw, the audio and the video were not in sync. And so you can tell that, this is kind of what I do for a living, right? Is the first time that his gun recoils, it's later than that you hear the audio report of it. So what we had to do is go back and resync it. It's not hard to do. It's, you just line it up in a video editing software. Because when I first saw it, basically what had happened is that the audio had been kind of moved forward. So it went bang, and then the gun moved later.
Okay.
And so then that last shot looked to me like he had come up and he went to go reach for the gun, and his gun went off again. And I was like, oh, I bet you he had a negligent discharge. Then when you sync it up, though, he reached over, grabbed the gun, comes back and puts one in the guy's head.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm his attorney, which I'm not an attorney.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, I'm not barred in any state. I've not been to law school. I'm not going to law school. But if I said in my analysis of that video, I said, if I'm his attorney, my argument to the district attorney is what he is doing there is abusing a corpse. And I don't think he's going to get away with that.
It's so funny you say that, because the conversation I had with a student in my class this past weekend, and I said there's a famous case that we read in law school about a woman who died during a gang rape.
Right.
And the question was, how could they tell when she died, and how could they prosecute somebody for rape when rape requires a live victim? And they ended up being able to successfully prosecute them only for bestiality. Oh, I'm sorry, for necrophilia. As horrible as that story is, it raises the same issue. How do you know the guy wasn't dead when you fired the last shot?
I mean, the Johnny Cochran defense is we insert a little bit of doubt, right?
Right.
That's what he did. I mean, let's be real. I mean, we all know OJ killed Nicole. I mean, there's no question about that, but that's not the question. It's, can we prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did? No. And so if I'm his attorney, that's what
you focus on.
What else are you going to do? You've got him on camera, grabs the gun. I now have his means of doing deadly harm. So, and he's laying on the ground. So do I have manifested intent? No. Does the jury feel sorry for this guy? Also no. And so
what do you got left? Yeah.
It's interesting, in Texas, of course, every single homicide goes to a grand jury. It has to by law. And somebody said, oh man, that guy's in trouble. I said, man, you
that's
don't.
what Texas is famous, folks, for what we call the bastard needed killing defense.
Well,
and it's a matter of public attitude. Like you said, it has to go to a grand jury. If the grand jury decides, hey, guy wants to go in and rob a liquor store, or wants to go in and rob a taco store, and there's 12 armed people in Texas, by God, then he's going to get what he pays for.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if the grand jury no-billed him.
Yeah,
frankly.
I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't be surprised. Now, of course, so the crazy part of grand jury proceedings, right, is they're closed. And the defense, if there was one here, and there is, he's got a criminal defense attorney, gets to submit a report, but they don't get to participate.
That's right.
And so
sadly,
the prosecutor, it's a closed environment. The prosecutor makes their best case, and the grand jury says, is there probable cause here to proceed with a criminal trial?
The old saying is that a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich with a grand jury anytime they want to, because they present the evidence that they want, and that's that. So,
and they could also not get an indictment, but we don't know, did he really take an earnest swing at the evidence? Or, can the prosecutor look at the grand jury and say, here's the facts as we have them. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, it's your decision to make. But I think I'd have a really hard time at trial with this one, so I'd prefer we just not go through the trouble.
My understanding, there's one last issue, is that it wasn't a real gun. Is that correct? Is that your understanding as well?
It wasn't.
It looked real. So the ability is to, folks, when you say they have to have the ability to kill a human, it's actually the ability or the perceived ability. So a realistic looking fake gun would still give the perceived ability of lethal force. If it's a transparent green translucent squirt gun dripping water, I doubt that's going to pass muster, but that looked like a real gun to me. So I guess I would say that's really not an issue. Would you agree?
I would agree. I mean, would a reasonable person believe that they had the ability to do deadly harm? So that's like, okay, I joke with people. So if somebody is approaching you with a knife and saying, I'm going to kill you, do they have that would you reasonably perceive that ability? I say it depends. Now, in a normal sense, for most people, yes. But now let's say it's your 85-year-old grandmother who's on a walker and she's got a knife in this hand and she goes, you come over here, I'm going to kill you, Dad, with her little bitty walker, and you're like, Grandma, put the knife down.
Yeah.
Then no, she doesn't have the ability, right? And so, in that case, though, certainly given what we see there, would a reasonable person perceive that he had that ability? Yes. I think his case is even more kind of difficult in that. So then the guy rifles through the deceased's pockets, takes all the money out that he's stolen from people, returns, basically hands it back, deals it back to everybody. How much money did he take from you? Oh, here's your cell phone, here's your wallet, here's your stuff.
This guy thinks he's Kevin Costner in Nottingham Forest.
No kidding.
At this point.
Then all the customers, now listen, all the customers leave. And then he decides, I'm out of here. And jumps in his truck and goes. And doesn't call cops, doesn't do anything.
Again, we've talked about that before,
And listen, I understand why some people don't trust law enforcement. I understand why some people would not want to have contact with law enforcement. However, they definitely, in this case, want to have contact with you.
Well, and there's 16 witnesses and videotape. I mean, you think they're not going to figure this out? I mean, you probably paid for your food with a credit card. I mean, come on, you just be smart about this.
It's not like they're not going to. So I actually said, I put that one out pretty soon after it happened. And I told that guy, I said, look, I don't know if you know this man, or if sir, you're watching, what I want you to do right now is I want you to call an attorney. I want you to call an attorney right now, and you need to be sitting with a criminal defense attorney in your jurisdiction to before you call the police. And in fact, you want your attorney to call the police for you at this point.
Now, are you saying this guy did contact you?
So no, I'm saying. So I said
you had that opportunity.
When I put this video out on my YouTube channel, and I said, if you know this guy, or if he watches this, so come to find out that. I found out a little bit later that he had contacted an attorney, and then did submit to questioning. So then the police were like, "Hey, we're not sure if he's committed a crime," and so, hey, make sure your attorney is sitting right there.
Yeah, no doubt.
You're sitting there, and your attorney is speaking.
And guys,
words.
There's nothing magical about an attorney either. I mean, the attorney can't keep you from blurting something out. The purpose of the attorney is, I don't just show up at the interview with the cops. We're gonna conduct our own interview, which is confidential, and we're gonna go through it 50 times and make sure we understand exactly what the facts are, make sure we present those facts the way we want them presented, and then the attorney will be with you when you give that statement to the cops to kind of kick the rudder if need be. But there's nothing magical about an attorney that just magically makes you safe like a lot of people seem to think.
And of course, if you say to an attorney, well, yeah, I really did in my mind, I wanted to murder that guy, but what I'm going to do is lie to the cops. Of course, your attorney's going to say, you can't do that.
People don't understand that either. If you tell me, yeah, I murdered this guy, well, I can't tell anybody else you told me that, but I can no longer allow you to say anything other than that because that's suborning perjury.
Right.
And that's a crime for me and for you, and I'll lose my license to practice law and worse, and that's not allowable either. So you've got to be a smart consumer of these services as well.
And at the same time, that's when your attorney says, you don't have to answer questions.
That's correct.
You have a Fifth Amendment right.
for a reason. That's
and it
right.
exists, as Ron White said, I had the right to remain silent, but I didn't have the ability.
I've stolen that line so many times, yeah.
So you got to not be Ron White, right?
Right.
You got to keep the ability.
In so many ways.
So I think, honestly, if this one goes to a jury, depends on the jury you get.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part is you never know what jury you're going to get.
That's correct.
And you might get a jury of people who say, nope, prison.
And you might, but again, don't forget, this has to be a unanimous verdict. And I always tell people, I don't have to convince 12 people that my client was right. I have to convince one that my client may have been right.
Right.
That's all it takes. That's a mistrial. A mistrial means they have to start over, and the state's not going to do that more than a couple of times, most likely. So, that's just it. Can I get one person on that jury that thinks, well, maybe he shouldn't have fired that last shot, but by God, that guy shouldn't have come in to rob a taco store either. And, my uncle got robbed like that, and he got pistol whipped, and he's never been the same since. And these people need to be off the streets and blah, blah. So this whole street justice vigilantism thing, as sad as that is to talk about, it exists, and you can't deny it. So.
Well, and there are jurisdictions that he needed killing.
Yeah, the bastard needed killing defense. Yeah.
Is an actual kind of thing, not to mention the fact that I know nobody likes to talk about it in a legal place, but jury nullification does exist.
You bet
that the jury stands not only over the facts, but over the law.
That's right.
And so the jury can say, this meets the requirements, but we refuse to convict.
And if they're smart enough, they don't point that out.
Yeah,
they just
never
they just
point
render
that
the
out.
verdict. Because yeah. One of my favorites about what we're talking about right now is, and I know you do a lot of stuff in Latin America. You're very, very popular in Spanish as well. But I know it's my understanding that in Brazil, the machismo defense is still on the books in Brazil. So if a man, and it's very sexist, obviously, if a man catches his wife cheating on him in flagrant delicto, he can kill the offender and the wife.
Yes.
And that's a legitimate defense to manslaughter and murder charges in Brazil, which I always found to be quite interesting. They probably don't talk about that in the marriage vows, do they?
Yeah, they don't necessarily mention that in those. And again, if you did that in a court in America today, you certainly don't want to mention it in the jury room deliberating.
No,
and you
for
certainly don't want to mention it afterwards.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think these are the kinds of things where, we say be a good person, be a good, sane, sober, moral, and prudent person. And listen, those first 4 shots, I think you're in a must. I really need to shoot that guy.
Right.
He's going to put somebody in the hospital or kill somebody. The second 4 shots,
tough call.
you say, okay, so we go, can I, should I, must I?
Right.
All right, you probably can. That 9th shot,
yeah, that's tough to justify. He might get away with it.
He might.
But that does not make it right.
He might. And if the prosecutor's mad about it and the grand jury no bills on the other ones, he could come back and say, I want a charge of desecrating a dead body.
Make the point.
Right?
Right?
I want a conviction, sucker.
And that wraps up another episode of Guns and Gavels. Join us next time to learn more about the legal use of force, personal protection, and firearms training. Show your support and hit the like and subscribe buttons to make sure you never miss an episode. Till next time, stay safe.